what the wall on the outside would look like if you do this. I have my extension rods. They're like your shower curtain rods that have tension on them. They go all the way up to the top to form a wall, a plastic wall. The PSI on the compressor is extremely important to be correct in order to get the right amount of volume of material onto your wall or ceiling. In my case, in this video, I used 45 PSI, but if you play with it on a mock-up wall, you can come up with the right amount of pressure. So the mixture is important. We're mixing it loosely because we want big blobs of texture on the ceiling. And it's a little bit of a tricky thing to master. So you can see how loose that is, okay? I'll touch it for you. This way you have an idea of what we're actually talking about. That's perfect, you see? That's going to allow me to throw big blobs on the ceiling. You see, this is thick knockdown. And you can't get away with making it more dense because it just won't throw the big blobs. So the right texture, the right air pressure, and the right orifice on your hopper is essential to matching the texture. They have stands for these hoppers. Okay. Good. Yep. Wow, very good. I'm testing it out to see how much I need. So now, that's only one part of doing it successfully. The next part is, when do you knock it down? Well, one of the general rules is to wait for the wetness to disappear. You see the shiny wetness? If you smear it too quickly, you'll ruin it. Let's wait. So now, as we're waiting for it to set up, I have my 24-inch knockdown knife from Hyde. You can use a metal spatula, a taping knife, but they tend to be a little hard if you haven't done it. This is flexible, and it tends to be good for people who have never done it before, or for the professional who's looking to cover 2 feet at a time. If you're doing large ceilings, you want to hook this up to your paint pole, get rid of your roller, put down your knockdown knife, and you just walk along under the ceiling, dragging this along. So it's worth the investment. I got this at Sherwin-Williams. Tricky, but you can do it too. If you want to get the big globs, because your texture is big, what you want to have, I know I got texture on my face here, what you want to have is hanging globs of texture. If they're not hanging, your texture is going to be thin. You see, if your texture is thick on the ceiling, the way to replicate thickness is that when you shoot that texture on the ceiling, one, that your air is not too high, so it's not forcing too quickly the product out of the nozzle. Secondly, you want to make sure that the orifice on the hopper is wide, the widest. There are 3. And thirdly, before you shut down the operation, you want to make sure that your texture is hanging in globs. What it means when it's hanging is that when you go to knock it down, see, a lot of people who watch this video don't even really understand what knockdown is, and that's why I have my YouTube channel. That's fine. I didn't know what it was. I was fascinated by knockdown when I got to Florida. Like, how do you do this? So what you're knocking down are the globs. The more they hang, right? the more widespread will be the knockdown texture. If they're not hanging much when you go to knock them down, you're going to have what's called a thin knockdown. So, if you've done it right thus far, and your texture, you put it on thick enough, and it's hanging down just nicely, but you knock it down too quickly, it's going to be like, you know when you roast a marshmallow and you just kind of like squeeze into it prematurely, the whole outside collapses? You know what I'm talking about. That's what'll happen here. Be very careful not to knock down the texture too quickly. The way to determine whether or not your texture is sufficiently ready to knock it down with your knife is to see the shine of the water content in the knockdown texture. If you can see wetness, don't knock it down. You want to wait for that point exactly at which the shine disappears. It's tricky. If you wait too long, you'll be scraping it. If you knock it down too quickly, you have to start all over again. We're gonna just fine tune the final product.